AI แปล
So, my name is Ryan Neely. I'm the CEO and co-founder at Scribe Medical, and we're a medical device company. We're building instant cardiac screening for uninterrupted cancer treatment. We actually put up a nice segue for me talking about breast cancer. Every oncologist knows that getting treatment to their patients as quickly and efficiently as possible is critical. But unfortunately, a lot of these treatments also carry a high risk of toxicity to the heart. Actually, cardiovascular complications are the #2 cause of death in cancer patients after cancer itself. So for that reason, it's really essential that we watch out for these effects. But unfortunately, the tools we have to do this today are really lacking. So oncologists are waiting weeks or even months in some cases to get their patients in to get a cardiac ultrasound so that they can know it's okay to continue treatment. And as a result, a lot of times we miss these key windows where intervention can be the most effective. But also, oncologists are delaying these life-saving treatments while waiting for results to come back. So what we really need is tools for oncology that fit the urgent need of their patients. So at Scribe Medical, that's exactly the problem that we're trying to address. So we have built a unique sensor array that can detect the subtle signs of heart damage caused by cancer drugs. And we put all of those signals into an AI model that we've developed and trained on over 150,000 echocardiograms. And all of those sensors and AI is packaged into a tiny, wearable, non-invasive device that patients can wear at home or in the oncologist clinic itself. And with a 5-minute scan, we can tell doctors that it's okay to continue treatment or detect issues early so that they can be resolved before they become permanent. We've already validated our device in hundreds of patients in a clinical trial across the US and also here in Thailand. And we're setting up ourselves to submit to the FDA next year. So our mission really is just to make sure that cancer patients live long and healthy lives during the survivorship period. And we want to do that by making sure that there are no delays in their treatment so we can reduce their long-term mortality, but also give doctors a chance to intervene early and make sure that their hearts stay healthy during treatment and for the rest of their long life as well. That's it.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Ryan. So that's AI for drug discovery for Ramadan, AI for med device for Ryan and Scribe. And then maybe we move to Arunten, like Khan, to sharing about his venture.
All right. I'd like to talk about the Presence. Presence is actually one of the ventures in my company and my works. Okay. Quickly glance to actually I'm a venture builder, been building at least like 45 startups, circulating around in fintechs and healthcare. And healthcare is actually my most passionate area. So one of the co-founders is actually Dr. Surabha. She's actually got a King's Scholarship from Rural College, and she's a PhD in body sensor. And she's the co-founder of Presence. Also, we have Benny Low, who's actually our co-founder as well. Benny Low got a 50 million pound funds from Melinda Gates Fund. Actually, we've been building at least 2,000 devices over the past 15 years because of the funds we have found a very interesting body sensor. That's where the Presence comes in. So, pitch line quickly. I have a questions in which like, what if we stay healthy didn't begin at hospital? It's very, very important, especially with limited doctors we have, the services and things. How do we move things from the hospital to home care? These are the statistics that that is actually being lingering around. I'm not going to go through every one of them, but how do we change from reactive? You see doctor get the symptom of fear, actually solve it. But actually, what if we can actually we can watch your health continuously in real time? Which we probably use that in Apple Watch and Garmin already. But if you notice, it's actually not real time in all the times. You need to sync until actually so you can get information and analyze it. But still, these watches, they are not designed for diagnostic because they are not claimed to be. So our concept is very simple. We sense it with wearable. We have our own patented device body sensor attached to the body check your activities. But also, we also integrate it with any IoT device that have in markets. Currently, Apple Watch, Garmin, Huawei, any watch actually have already integrated. And we start detecting. But detecting is actually work with collaboration with a lot of medical school in Thailand, abroad as well. And then we act. Act in terms of, okay, if it's emergency, if it's a very simple lifestyle change, we just advise, what kind of lifestyle they need to change. But if it's life-threatening, how do we actually get an SOS to your loved one, to the hospital, to the nearby urgent care? So at home, presents, and your local doctor. That's a very simple pitch line for the presents. So as I mentioned, actually we work with the top medical school in Thailand, Chulalongkorn, Siriraj, Mahidol, and actually Imperial College, London. Our that doesn't wait to get sick is actually much better than the world. So quickly, I can just currently actually deploying in Thailand for the 12 elderly care centers, and also one of the largest nursing care in Osaka. So I think that's a pitch line for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh wow, that's coincide with lifespan that we're talking about. Not only lifespan, but health span, right? To monitoring this using Present. How about you, Prem? Please.
Thank you for having us. Prem Timkosi here, managing partner and founder of Boundless Health Capital. We're in stealth mode, so I have these slides for you. But the thesis around Boundless Health Capital is to invest and create companies at the intersection of tech, health, and bio. And this was largely in part born out of the thesis I developed when I was at the MSD Global Health Innovation Fund for 11 years, where I invested on behalf of the world's largest oncology company across things like precision medicine, quantum computing, and the related tech bio space. What I saw at MSD was that drug development is extremely expensive. I think Professor Chu mentioned this in his talk earlier, right? $2.5 billion to develop a new therapy to market. And for that $2.5 billion, right, we have an outcome which is relatively poor. Like in oncology, for instance, which we talked about today, the average overall survival for a new cancer therapy, which means a drug that's been approved, which means it's better than the current standard of care, is only about 2.8 to 3.3 months. And think about the quality of life. We talked about health span, right? Only 6% of oncology trials in phase 3 improve both overall survival and quality of life. So what we're talking about is a huge amount of money going to very poor health outcomes for drug development discoveries today. Raibodine talked about the poverty of drug targets we had. 10 years ago, we had about 100 drug targets that are being pursued in the biopharma pipeline. And today it's about 30, right? So there's a huge crowding of development to very few number of targets and only very few number of winners, right? Everyone has heard about the GLP-1 race, right? Every pharma company has heard of the GLP-1 race. So the work that Raibodine is doing is super important. And so our goal at Boundless Health Capital is to invest in companies and create companies that are pushing the boundaries to understand biology from the foundation up. We think AI is certainly a helpful accelerant to that, but it's not enough, right? There's been companies in drug development AI for a number of years now, and they've been able to make progress on phase 1 therapies to fill the pipeline and engineer around safety. But the problem is when they come to phase 2, they fail at the same or worse rates than currently approved therapies. So what we're trying to do is partner with the Academic Medical Center to create companies that can push the boundaries and find new companies and ways to solve these problems. Thank you.
Thank you, Brent. Wow, that's kind of like a good opening. But also, we'd like to double think on that right before we coming back to older style and Turner. How, because we are kind of like everybody here yeah, like we're here in Thailand. But we'd love to hear how like the ecosystem and also the trend, like in health tech, medtech, biotech, in the US this day. What is the future? Yeah, if you can predict it.
Yeah, of course. And so in my role at MSD's investment fund, so our mandate was to invest in health tech. And I started to invest in the back space. I also invested in our European companies as well. So, and we started to look at Asian investments in 2020, but obviously there's a big event that prevented us from doing a lot of work in that space. It's my belief, looking at that phase of development versus what's happening in the future, it's all about clinical outcomes, actually. And so that seems intuitive, but before it wasn't necessarily the case, actually. If you look at health tech in sort of the 2010 to 2015, it's about how you can use data better, right? And how do you think about putting tools on top of that. I think the next phase is about how do you think about engagement. So how do you a lot of these health companies that emerged in that period that we were lucky to be part of and had some very good exits in were about increasing engagement with your health. And I think this phase going forward is all about health outcomes. Unfortunately, that's very hard to prove, and it's very hard for health tech to be able to accelerate and improve that thesis. But I think that's the future. And I think we talked about thinking about scale across some of those different areas. And I think that's the North Star that gets you portability from Asia to the US and to European markets is the ability to improve health outcomes and to show with regulatory grade certainty that you can do that. So that's what I think the future of health tech should be.
Awesome. Yeah. So I mean, from the investor perspective, outcome is probably one of the most important thing. If you cannot change the outcome, no worth to kind of pursuing this, right? Coming back to all the founders, entrepreneurs here, right? So I think when the goal for Southeast Asia Health Innovation Hub and why everybody are here today is because we want to see one day Thailand and Southeast Asia be merged into the global kind of innovator for health tech, medtech, biotech, right? But we'd love to hear kind of from your experience, because some of you mentioned that with relation to the university spin out IP, and today we also have many academics, right? And also from the academic medical institution are here with us. They also researcher building new things, right? So how the IP and also research from the university kind of helping you or related to what you are building right now? Yeah, maybe you start something like
Yeah, absolutely. So, as I mentioned before, we are technically a spin-off from the Knight Cancer Institute of Oregon Health and State University, right? And so the critical IP was founded from there. How that would apply to Southeast Asia and in Thailand, I think there's a common thread that we've heard throughout, right, in the industry, is the failure rate that occurs at the clinic. When a molecule enters the clinic, about 90 to 95% of the molecules fail, right? They never make it commercial. And so that is a translation problem, the translatability. And at Ribodyne, we've taken a very specific approach, and some other companies are doing that too, of instead of doing the target discovery or the drug discovery starting in a test tube, we're now starting from patient samples first. And that's where we go in and we look for the novel targets. We use RiboCypher and try to find a screening signal in the dark proteome that many patients share in common. So the more patient samples that we test, the better, right? Now we're up to, the platform is very scalable, so we're up to 2,000 patient samples analyzed. And as we know, again, it doesn't always translate depending on your genetics. So the broader the patient population that you test, the better chances of success and of servicing a bigger patient population too. And so that's where these partnerships can be very critical. I'd say from the beginning, from establishing those relationships, and you at CX have made introductions to some of the hospitals here in Thailand and Bangkok, and so we're actively having those conversations of sourcing some tumor biopsies and patient samples, but beyond there, going into clinical trials too, a big bottleneck is how do we do it faster and honestly quite cheaper too, right? And so that's where, as you said before, there's a big opportunity here too. And that perhaps in the United States and in Europe, people aren't aware of yet.
Well, yeah, so again, your recommendation means for the researcher, they should go to the patient earlier, not just kind of like doing something in the lab and then see the patient later, too late.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think a lot of more companies are starting to realize that, but we have to get out of, again, there's no real good animal models either, right? And so the sooner you get into first in human, the sooner you start playing with patient samples, the better the outcome's going to be. And actually, again, since AI is one of those themes, could AI help us with that? I'm a big proponent that I think yes, of course, as long as you've got the right data sets, right? Because you have to have the right data sets to train the AI, garbage in, garbage out. And the same with animal models. If you're working with an animal model that doesn't, that disease doesn't even exist in animals, and it's a fake, contrived experiment, what are you really going to learn? So no surprise that we get all these failures in the clinic, right?
Cool. How about you, Ryan? How about Scribe?
Yeah, I think in regard to academic partnerships, you brought up, I think, the two most important pieces, which are the IP and the research partnership. And I think to give an example of, for us, a couple weeks ago, I was actually invited to the Mayo Clinic in Minnesota, where they brought in investors and startups and people from the Mayo Clinic, really just to foster that relationship. And I think from the perspective of a startup, you want to know what IP is available and how do I license it to use it. And I think having a strong tech transfer office is really important there that can work with startups and understands what that looks like. I mean, in terms of being flexible around taking equity over maybe royalties right away, because startups obviously are strapped for cash. And then also, really facilitating research partnerships. And I think that's actually an opportunity where, academic institutions can benefit because, you can strike up these relationships where, for example, in our company, we're focused on oncology, but we're also interested in other applications like pericardial cardiomyopathy. And we'd love to do a research collaboration with a group who could, take what we're building and use it in their own study. And that's an opportunity where we can co-develop some IP and then, share in those royalties. So that's an opportunity for the academic center to, benefit financially. We get to work with great partners who are very knowledgeable in the space, and we can advance, our opportunities in the marketplace as well. And so I think just, making that outreach to these startups in a way that lets them kind of plug into your ecosystem and being friendly to, making those IP agreements and, striking up those research partners that, you're not putting up barriers to getting those things going, is the right place to start.
Cool. So you're using the strategic partnership with people like Mayo Clinic, also extending kind of like your network, and also other ways to partner with them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think just having the information out there, like sort of inviting like events like this, putting together these groups of people who, fostering those relationships and just creating awareness around what's out there to collaborate on.
Have you licensed some of the technology from other institutions as well?
Our company right now we have not, but in past startups I have. It's pretty funny. We've licensed technology from UC Berkeley, which is actually where I helped develop it. And we also licensed technology from Stanford. And Stanford was willing to take equity, and they made a lot more money, even though we developed most of the technology at Berkeley, and they ended up, being more difficult to work with, and didn't work out for them in the end. So I think that's a great example of how, just knowing how to work with startups can benefit all parties.
What is a trick if you would like to share how to, as an entrepreneur, to negotiate or talking to academic medical institution that have the IP?
I think you need to find the right person the tech transfer office is really where all this happens, and you need to kind of find a person who's the champion there, who understands what you're doing, and understands like how to work within your constraints, and in ways that also benefit the university. Because in the end, it's really mutually beneficial, and finding people who kind of understand what startups are going through, and can push that license through quickly, because time is of the essence. And I think just getting to know those people is really key.
Wonderful. Coming to Tim, and so I think you're also working a lot with Thai-based university as well. What is your pre-sale experience?
Yeah, I guess the health tech is a different beast than because my life is actually circling around fintechs. And healthcare is sometimes you cannot just speed up. You need to work with the people on the ground, especially doctors, because trust is everything, as I mentioned on previous sessions. And we started by actually providing our platform for the medical school, do the research, do the paperwork, to actually do a really groundwork in the population of Thailand, and then we start expanding to other countries. And one thing that I can say wholeheartedly, especially in Thailand, we have one of the greatest doctors in the world, because I've been working with a doctor around the world as well. And a lot of things still in the labs, on the shelf. And one of the fascinating things one of the best decisions that I made was buying patent from Thailand on the shelf, and actually make it, commercialize it, but still working with the doctor on the ground, and actually make it really work. So currently, it's like we started very easy from fall detections, fall prevention. We can start predicting, what's maybe tomorrow you're gonna fall. But with that things, actually doctors start telling us more and more information, like, some movement of the body, some indication from smart devices start predicting when you're gonna get Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, dementia. And recently, actually, we started working with CIRA in terms of how do we predict NCD, and how do we actually, this is a big deal, actually, when we talk about NCDs, actually consume a lot of budget expense at the national level, the whole world. If we actually can do this with the doctor, with the medical school, when create a model, we can actually expand it and federate it with every nation at the global stage, and change the game. That's my vision for Reset. It's definitely start with the home care, and we talk a lot about data sovereignty, but I'm all for data sovereignty as well, but I'm also very interested in individual health sovereignties. They own their health data. They actually knows why things made to them, and they have participated in the decision making along the process. Yeah.
Cool, thank you. And then, for as everybody know, right? I think in the past few years, China has become one of the fastest growing, health, AI, biotech, epicenter of the world, right? If you're looking at the data, you see that last year alone, 230% growth, from the year period for the new drug asset, right? From the investor perspective, right? So how investor in the U.S. Looking at China and also rest of the world compared to the U.S. Innovation in healthcare. What is your view?
Yeah, I think it's remarkable, right? The growth. So we started looking to invest in China in 2019, 2020, as I said. Actually, my last meeting before the COVID pandemic got to scale was with a bunch of researchers from China. But to see the change from 2019, 2020 until now is remarkable. You said 23% growth. It's actually something like 50% of the phase 1 pipeline globally is from China, right? So, or would be close to 50% soon. So you can't ignore the opportunity that's being generated in China. At the same time, from what I'm hearing from some of our business development folks as well, is that there's a lot of desire for Chinese biotech to externalize some of their innovations, right? To think about locations outside of China, to domicile some of their assets, some of their technologies, so that they can access the global market more freely. So we think, and I think, and I hope this actually also a Thai national, that very hopeful that Thailand can have an opportunity to participate in some of that externalization. investment standpoint, so you can't ignore it. Some of our biotech, traditional biotech investors have really seized on the idea of like building funds in China and investing in Chinese assets. Others have thought about, well, are there portfolio companies, can they license things cheaply from China now? It's no longer a cheap place to license things from, right? So I think the more evolved view of how we think about global investing is find the most innovative technologies anywhere in the world to bring those forward. And I think what's going to be exciting kind of in the next phase is that, you know, these molecules will become not, I wouldn't say commoditized, too broad of a brush, but it's becoming a lot more interesting when you can divorce the idea of drug development from patient populations, from regulatory pathways as well. So I think it'll be a very exciting time for creating investments in the next, 5 to 10 years or so.
Yeah, I totally agree because at the end, maybe licensing from China is not cheaper, but probably still faster, right? Taking that note, coming back to entrepreneur, yeah, like because China is also coming up fast, sometimes cheap, right? And then how we still developing things from the U.S. Like how we need to adapt, and what things we could learn, from the Chinese model as they're growing super fast. But we'd love to kind of like hear some of your view on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot to learn from. It's interesting because whereas, there is an opportunity because there's a lot of the geopolitical issues too, right? We're from the U.S., we've got a DoD grant, and now we're not allowed to work with certain Chinese companies either. So
I heard that like the phase 2 and phase 3 trial, you cannot do it in China anymore with regard to USFDA approval. Is that true?
So there's a window opening up. There's definitely a window opening up there, and of course, as an entrepreneur and a biotech company, when you're trying to pitch, a therapeutics company or a platform therapeutics, the biggest value inflection comes from when you can get that molecule first in human and get some sort of a positive readout, right? That's the biggest value inflection. And so the sooner you can, again, go back to the theme of the sooner you can get to the patient, get your drug to the patient, the better. And those are the things that China has enabled and that we could copy and do better or just copy and paste, right? So of course it's the patient recruitment, if we can make that faster, and the cost is very important too. But really time is money. So patient recruitment, getting into the trials faster, maybe loosen up even, the IND submission process. I believe that Australia is quite competitive in that space too. And so we have a partnership with Lilly, and they always encourage us, hey, look into Australia, look into China. It would be great to get Thailand into the conversation too,
Awesome. Cool. How about you, Ryan? Because you're building the med device, right? Again, when you're talking about the manufacturing, definitely building something in the U.S. probably going to be costly compared to the Chinese, where you still be able to return your IP for sure if you're still in the U.S. How these kind of dynamics would affect the way of thinking for Scribe going forward?
Yeah, it's you bring up a good point, and I think it's a difficult balance to strike. I mean, obviously, you want to bring costs down and do things efficiently, but at the same time, I think everyone is always a little bit wary about manufacturing in China for IP issues. Whether that's going to sort of trickle out and be instantiated in China under a different brand. So I think what Imad was saying is really true, is that as an early stage company, you're really just trying to de-risk a lot of things, and I think in med tech it's especially difficult because you need to de-risk the clinical side, you need to de-risk the technology, you need to de-risk the regulatory landscape, you need to de-risk the commercial pathway. So there's a lot of work to do there, and I think where a country like Australia or China, and I think potentially Thailand, could also benefit is how do you streamline credits for smaller companies, so you can do it more cheaply there. And then, also making sure that you have the right standards in place, because now it is possible to do trials elsewhere and submit them to the FDA, but they need to adhere to certain standards in order for that to be possible. So I think making sure the infrastructure is there, that the CROs work well with the hospitals, work well with the review boards, and they also abide by these kind of same standards is a great way to create that draw to pull companies in.
Just to add to that as well, in the U.S. now with the NAMs, the FDA has loosened the restrictions of going into animals for biologics, right? It's not required anymore. So, for example, we're working on a T-cell engager, and again, it was advised by Lilly. They said, hey, for a T-cell engager, it's a full biologic. You don't need to go do your tox in animals, so we can skip that process. So again, for us, that means, we can do more on a lower budget. And it really is pointless because again, there's no translatability there. Our targets don't even exist in the animal model, so why even test it? And there's only so much you can gain from that. So that shrinks timelines, and that is something that we could start thinking about. To your point of streamlining processes, how we can do that better. And I think the industry's moving towards that.
Yeah, it seems like like a biotech company also want to squeeze timeline, like a medtech company also want to squeeze the timeline. And how, please share some experience right now about like you've been running the trial like here as well in Thailand, like as you mentioned. How fast? Compared to other things in the U.S. that you tried you have done. Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is maybe a telling example. So, we started, one of the first sites that we started contracting with was Stanford, and that was back in September of last year. And I think pretty shortly after we started working with you to bring our trial here, I think maybe it took us, 6 weeks or something before we were, on the ground running the trial here in Thailand. And we're still contracting with Stanford, so we haven't started there yet. So I think, for us, that early human data was really the critical piece that we need to move forward and show that our technology works, and that helps this snowball keep rolling and attracting investment, attracting partnerships, just getting doctors excited. And so the faster you can get that ball rolling, the better. And so that was a great experience that we had here. And I think having a partner on the ground that understands the ecosystem here was key for them. I don't think I would have been comfortable trying to do that on my own, because I don't know this ecosystem as well as I do things back in the West. But obviously, we were able to plug in really easily and get that going quickly, which was huge.
Yeah, that is an opportunity for Thailand as well. As you mentioned, working with Stanford might use 9 months, and then probably 9 weeks here. So it's kind of like shrinking the timeline, which I'm sure all the biotech community need. How about you guys? We'd love to hear your experience, between how we could, a company like Crescent, be able to take advantage from, the geopolitical, the U.S. and China, and how you would plan to grow from here.
Yeah, if you notice, actually one of the founders is actually Chinese people. So actually we are already taking advantage, and we actually expand heavily in China. They actually partnering with us in China. And we also have access to one of the largest labs in China as well. The head of the lab in Shanghai just happened to used to be the head of the lab at Imperial College, where he actually went back to China 12 years ago. He is our advisor. So actually, but in terms of how do we compete? I think I have a few ideas. First, I think I think we should buy the speed, because I think China is very fast. Actually, everybody in China especially, but we should own the trust, which means that it's localized. The speed will never replace trust, because trust is everything when it comes to the healthcare. The second one is actually going back to the trust, we scale trust, not data, because I think definitely Thailand, 65 million, 66 million people is not that huge comparing to the whole global population. But of course, since we sit between the rest of the world, actually we should be the bridge, not competitors. That's my opinion. We never outrun China, but we can out-localize it. And China is very happy to work with Thai people in terms of how to localize it, to be more Thai, the rest of the world as well. And also, definitely important actually, we orchestrate, do not copy, because we cannot copy China, and we should never do that. I think that's my point in terms of how we collaborate with China.
Yeah, sure. I mean, we should cooperate as an Asian country as well, right?
Yes.
So because
Southeast Asia,
how we could utilize their infrastructure to benefit our country. Yeah, maybe the last question for all of you before we come into the next session, right? So I'd love to, because now we're talking about the background, health tech, biotech trend, right? Now, because we want to build an ecosystem here in Southeast Asia, learning from the US, learning from China, what is your advice, right? If you were to build Thailand and also Southeast Asia to be the health innovation hub of the world, right? Well, what else? From the outsider perspective, from the US global perspective, what else? We need to do apart from we have all the stakeholders here. What else we need to do? Maybe starting from him.
Yeah, it's a great question. One of the companies I'm helping to form right now really leads to this idea of being AI native. And the idea there is not so much that AI is one of the technology, but it's you're free of legacy infrastructure, right? And I think that if there is a concerted effort, the fact that we can convene, the leaders of all the major hospitals with government regulators into one room and talk about how to make Thailand more innovative in the future, to be more collaborative with the U.S. regulatory bodies, European regulatory bodies, et cetera. I mean, I think starting and leaving behind legacy infrastructure to start from an AI-first view going forward would be a really powerful way to leapfrog, right? I live in New York. I opened a Thai bank account last year. I'm shocked by the innovation that it's so much easier to use in Thailand compared to the U.S. I think there are opportunities like that on the healthcare side as well. So I'm super excited about being a part of it and collaborating to build some of that future.
So cool. Yeah, we need to leapfrog. Not just get rid of the traditional infrastructure that we have. Imad?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. If we can remove bureaucracy, to open our minds, and again, going back to the example of how animal models are just not that translatable, right? Well, if there is an AI model, for example, that we can build that, and it's going to be very specific depending on the indication of the disease, but a lot of companies are doing work on organoid models and things like that. So loosen some of the restrictions, which some of these restrictions are an accident in time. They just stuck, and it's the way the industry does it. But there's better ways of doing things. So opening our minds as to how else can we do this better. But yeah, also getting, we spoke about this earlier in the break, I believe, just getting the word out is super important too, right? And when we go to these trade shows, when we go to JPM or Bio International, there's a big, strong presence from Australia and China, and pitching that, hey, come and run your clinical trials here. So that is something that putting the word out. So for example, the effort that you're putting here is awesome, but also coming into the U.S. and putting the word out so that people are aware of it. I was talking to one of our other investors at Silicon Valley, very plugged in, and we were talking about, hey, how can we de-risk it and get to the clinic faster? And yeah, again, when I mentioned Thailand, they were shocked, right? And so, but they
Because what?
but the reaction was, oh, they just didn't know about it, right? But the reaction was very positive, like, oh, so if we can do it, let's do it. There was no, oh, no, type of thing. There was no negative feedback, but it was just unawareness. And so raising awareness is
Great stuff. Yeah, so we need to make a splash, making awareness in the US and globally. Ryan.
Yeah, I really resonate with everything that's said. I think the awareness is an important piece. I think both from the clinical trial side, making sure people understand the opportunity here in terms of, the CROs that are available, the health systems that you can plug into. But I think, going back to what we talked about earlier, I think, there's a great opportunity in the academic research side too. And I think having that outreach, maybe from some of the academic institutions, saying, hey, there's opportunities for sponsored research. We have world-class institutions and researchers here that you can partner with, and then use that to kind of move from those sort of early research partnerships into those clinical trial studies, because it's already sort of been seeded here, and then you can sort of naturally transition. And then the other pieces too, obviously important. Just making sure that access is quick and sort of simple for people to grasp, and then connecting with the right partners on the ground to really make that happen. So I think, those would really be the highlights for me.
Wonderful. So partnership and also deep connectivity between the ecosystem. Over to you, Tim.
Yeah, I've been working with a lot of countries in South Asia as well, and I can see the trend is actually coming towards South Asia. It's like, just for information, I think we've been working on a kids project. In Indonesia, 265 million people. They have 82 million kids, and they have 10 million young minors, which is like only focusing on this area actually is already larger than Thailand. And for us, South Asia to shine is actually we probably doesn't need a more hospital, but how do we integrate the healthcare and share knowledge, especially something that we probably don't have, but they have. For example, Indonesia is probably the largest halal food eater in the world. Healthcare, microbiome, anything is so different in Thailand than people who's actually not eating halal food. And actually some business model could come out of those health data, and everybody wins actually who get the data and actually can create the right product for the rest of the world. I think that's the strength of South Asia. I always pitching to a lot of people when they actually want to come to South Asia. This is the next China or India. So, no less.
Super cool. So that's the big opportunity out there. So to wrap it up, a little bit that we're talking about at the end, make awareness for Thailand to be known that we are kind of like a great country and also ready infrastructure, right? To be ready to make partnership. We also need to leapfrog, and then we can be kind of like the center, epicenter of health innovation in Southeast Asia with everybody here. With that, I'd like to thank all of you for this session, and then we enjoy the next session together. Thank you.